We're just hours away from closing arguments in the trial against Sean Diddy Combs. And while the jury was not in court today, the defense and the prosecution did meet to discuss how they will eventually instruct the jury to consider the charges. Now, as part of that, we learned something rather interesting. The prosecution is deciding to streamline their case. They no longer want jurors to consider their theory that Combs allegedly engaged in attempted kidnapping or attempted arson or aiding and abetting sex trafficking. Now, to be clear, the prosecution is still holding on to the arson and kidnapping theory of their case, arson and kidnapping being just two of the many predicate crimes that could be used to prove their RICO charge. And to remind you, the arson claim revolves around the alleged firebombing of Kid Cudi's car. The kidnapping claim comes presumably from the testimony of one of Diddy's former employees, Capricorn Clark, who testified that Diddy forced her to accompany him to Diddy's house. Now, it all sets up what we're told will be a 4-hour closing argument from the prosecution that will happen tomorrow, followed by the defense's arguments on Friday. With me now, trial attorney Monique Pressley and former federal prosecutor Jean Rossi. She is also the host of Make It Make Sense with Monique Pressley on YouTube. Well, I'm going to ask you to make it make sense in a second on that. But Jean, let me go to you first on this. What does it signal to you that they are no longer pursuing the attempted arson and attempted kidnapping in relation to RICO? And keep in mind, we don't have the final verdict form that the jurors will actually see. When I have that, I think we'll have a better sense of exactly what they plan to say in closing and what they'll argue. But knowing what we know now, what strikes you?
Okay, what strikes me about the proposed jury instructions is a couple things. When you start a case, when you're preparing your opening, you have to submit jury instructions to the judge.
Yes.
Probably maybe a week or two. You've done it. And you
Why do you do that?
You do it because the judge wants to know the law when the evidence comes in so he can determine or she can determine what's relevant and irrelevant. What strikes me, and Monique and I talked about this is an 8-page letter actually making very significant changes in the jury instructions. And we finally agree on something. This shows that, unless I'm betting wrong, that the government is very concerned about their case.
You agree?
Yeah.
Thank you.
I agree with me and Jean tonight. Listen, from the beginning, we've been talking about this case. They overcharged it. They came out guns blazing. They did what even progressive prosecutors have a problem with where RICO is concerned, where you try to throw everything in, including the kitchen sink, and see what's gonna stick. And were I the judge, never mind the defense, which is probably just wanting to stand on its head when they have the charging hearing, but the judge, were I the judge, would be very upset because I'm taking you really at your word and at the strength of your papers and at the recommendation on what you submitted, saying you're going to offer proof concerning these things. Well, we all know, we all watched the trial. We know they didn't offer anything that would look like requisite proof. So at the end,
well, they attempted to do. I mean, obviously, the prosecution feels they attempted to do so,
but it's
having
not enough.
days of testimony.
They
and that
know it's not
they
enough.
seem to think that through this. Just to be clear for the audience too. If you have these so-called predicate crimes, you're doing kind of mini trials to figure out if do you believe that arson happened? Have you proven it? Have you proven kidnapping? And then you use that to form the basis of the RICO. But you have been saying, frankly, both of you on both sides of this issue about this very point. But I want to go to the fact that the defense, they didn't really present a case. They don't have to, right? It's the prosecution's burden.
Right.
But Diddy's not going to testify. They are not calling witnesses. Good idea or heavy gamble?
The only idea, I mean, we had this conversation as well. Every time somebody asks me, is he
Are
gonna
you guys talking without me?
Is he gonna
I'm gonna have FOMO. Excuse me.
On camera.
Okay, fine. Go ahead.
Camera, but every time someone asks, I would say the only way he testifies is if he's not listening to his lawyers, because this case is not aided by hearing him discuss whatever happened in the bedroom in his own voice. The jury not hearing it in his voice and not attaching him to these actions is the best thing for his case. Now, that doesn't mean that they don't buy any of it. It just means that all they really have is the one audio for what he actually communicated to these women, and they're left to their own devices. So when the defense comes up and says these were choices, these were adults, this was a payoff, this was a money grab, you're not going to hear the voice of Mr. Combs saying anything, love or hate, wishing or desiring, hating or liking. You don't get anything, and that's where it should be, because the losses, the potential losses from him getting on the stand and all the things that they could ask him about, no, that would have been a catastrophe.
If that's exactly what the defense goes in their closing, what does the prosecution need to do tomorrow?
I was just going to suggest that.
That's beauty
The
of this.
prosecution has a heavy burden here, not just because it's beyond a reasonable doubt. They have to, and it goes with what you just said, Laura, for count one, the RICO, it's not just explain the elements of RICO. You have to describe the elements of arson, of kidnapping, of bribery, of drug dealing. That's going to take time. And if that prosecutor loses the jury during that segment of the closing, then they're not going to get a conviction on RICO. If I were a betting person, I think counts 3 and 5, the Mann Act, those
That's
are
the transportation to engage in
yeah,
prostitution.
it's a relatively easier count. I think they have a shot at a guilty on those 2 counts. I do.
Well, we'll see what happens. Monique, Jean, it's almost time. Thank you so much. Thank you all.